endless days to fill however I wished. I would read. I would explore. I pulled on my shorts, my t-shirts, my sandals. I went downstairs to the kitchen. My father was cooking while my mother slept in. He was wearing his dressing gown over his pyjamas. He often cooked breakfast on Saturdays. I said, "Dad, where's my comic?" He always bought me a copy of Smash before he drove home from work on Fridays, and I would read it on Saturday mornings. In the back of the car, "Do you want toast?" "Yes," I said, "but not burnt." My father did not like toasters. He toasted bread under the grill, and usually he burnt it. I went outside into the drive, I looked around, I went back into the house, pushed the kitchen door, went in. "Dad, where's the car?" "In the drive." "No, it isn't." "What?" The telephone rang, and my father went out into the hall where the phone was to answer it. I heard him talking to someone. The toast began to smoke under the grill. I got up on a chair and turned the grill off. "That was the police," my father said. "Someone's reported seeing our car abandoned at the bottom of the lane." I said I hadn't even reported it stolen yet. "Right, we can head down now, meet them there." "Toast!" He pulled the pan out from beneath the grill. The toast was smoking and blackened on one side. "Is my comic there, or did they steal it?" "I don't know. The police didn't mention your comic." My father put peanut butter on the burnt side of each piece of toast, replaced his dressing gown with a coat worn over his pyjamas, put on a pair of shoes, and we walked down the lane together. He munched his toast as he walked. I held my toast and did not eat it. We had walked for perhaps 5 minutes down the narrow lane which ran through fields on each side when a police car came up behind us. It slowed, and the driver greeted my father by name. I hid my piece of burnt toast behind my back while my father talked to the policeman. I wished my family would buy normal sliced white bread, the kind that went into toasters, like every other family I knew. My father had found a local baker's shop where they made thick loaves of heavy brown bread, and he insisted on buying them. He said they tasted better, which was, to my mind, nonsense. Proper bread was white and pre-sliced, and tasted like almost nothing. That was the point. The driver of the police car got out to open the passenger door, told me to get in. My father rode up front beside the driver. The police car went slowly down the lane. The whole lane was unpaved back then, just wide enough for one car at a time, a puddly, precipitous, bumpy way, with flints sticking up from it. The whole thing rotted by farm equipment and rain and time. "These kids," said the policeman, "they think it's funny. Steal a car, drive it around, abandon it. They'll be locals. I'm just glad it was found so fast," said my father. Past Caraway Farm, where a small girl with hair so blonde it was almost white, and red cheeks stared at us as we went past. I held my piece of burnt toast on my lap. "Funny them leaving it down here, though," said the policeman, "because it's a long walk back to anywhere from here." We passed a bend in the lane and saw the white Mini over on the side in front of a gate leading into a field, tires sunk deep in the brown mud. We drove past it, parked on the grass verge. The policeman let me out, and the three of us walked over to the Mini, while the policeman told my dad about crime in this area and why it was obviously the local kids had done it, and my dad was opening the passenger side door with his spare key. He said, "Someone left something on the back seat." My father reached back and pulled the blue blanket away that covered the thing in the back seat, even as the policeman was telling him that he shouldn't do that. And I was staring at the back seat because that was where my comic was. So I saw it. It was an it, the thing I was looking at, not a him. Although I was an imaginative child, prone to nightmares, I'd persuaded my parents to take me to Madame Tussauds Waxworks in London when I was 6, because I wanted to visit the Chamber of Horrors, expecting the movie monster chambers of horrors I'd read about in my comics. I'd wanted to thrill to waxworks of Dracula and Frankenstein's monster and the Wolfman. Instead, I was walked through a seemingly endless sequence of dioramas of unremarkable, glum-looking men and women who had murdered people. Usually lodgers and members of their own families. And who were then murdered in their turn by hanging, by the electric chair, in gas chambers. Most of them were depicted with their victims in awkward social situations. Seated around a dinner table, perhaps, as their poisoned family members expired. The plaques that explained who they were also told me that the majority of them had murdered their families and sold the bodies to anatomy. It was then that the word anatomy garnered its own edge of horror for me. I did not know what anatomy was. I knew only that anatomy made people kill their children. The only thing that had kept me from running screaming from the Chamber of Horrors as I was led around it was that none of the waxworks had looked fully convincing. They could not truly look dead, because they did not ever look alive. The thing in the back seat that had been covered by the blue blanket, I knew that blanket. It was the one that had been in my old bedroom, on the shelf, for when it got cold. Was not convincing either. It looked a little like the opal miner, but it was dressed in a black suit, with a white ruffled shirt and a black bow tie. Its hair was slicked back and artificially shiny. Its eyes were staring, its lips were bluish, but its skin was very red. It looked like a parody of health. There was no gold chain around its neck. I could see, underneath it, crumpled and bent, my copy of Smash, with Batman looking just as he did on the television, on the cover. I don't remember who said what then, just that they made me stand away from the Mini. I crossed the road, and I stood there on my own while the policeman talked to my father and wrote things down in a notebook. I stared at the Mini. A length of green garden hose ran from the exhaust pipe up to the driver's window. There was thick brown mud all over the exhaust, holding the hose pipe in place. Nobody was watching me. I took a bite of my toast. It was burnt and cold. At home, my father ate all the most burnt pieces of toast. Yum, he'd say, and charcoal, good for you, and burnt toast, my favourite. And he'd eat it all up. When I was much older, he confessed to me that he had not ever liked burnt toast, had only eaten it to prevent it from going to waste, and for a fraction of a moment, my entire childhood felt like a lie. It was as if one of the pillars of belief that my world had been built upon had crumbled into dry sand. The policeman spoke into a radio in the front of his car. Then he crossed the road and came over to me. "Sorry about this, Sonny," he said. "There's going to be a few more cars coming down this road in a minute. We should find you somewhere to wait that you won't be in the way. Would you like to sit in the back of my car again?" I shook my head. I didn't want to sit back there again. Somebody, a girl, said, "He can come back with me to the farmhouse. It's no trouble." She was much older than me, at least 11. Her red-brown hair was worn relatively short for a girl, and her nose was snub. She was freckled. She wore a red skirt. Girls didn't wear jeans much back then, not in those parts. She had a soft Sussex accent and sharp grey-blue eyes. The girl went, with the policeman, over to my father, and she got permission to take me away, and then I was walking down the lane with her. I said, "There is a dead man in our car." "That's why he came down here," she told me. "The end of the road. Nobody's going to find him and stop him round here at 3 o'clock in the morning. And the mud there is wet and easy to mould." "Do you think he killed himself?" "Yes." "Do you like milk? Gran's milking Bessie now." I said, "You mean real milk? From a cow?" And then felt foolish. But she nodded reassuringly. I thought about this. I'd never had milk that didn't come from a bottle. I think I'd like that. We stopped at a small barn where an old woman, much older than my parents, with long grey hair like cobwebs and a thin face, was standing beside a cow. Long black tubes were attached to each of the cow's teats. We used to milk them by hand, she told me, but this is easier. She showed me how the milk went from the cow, down the black tubes and into the machine, through a cooler and into a huge metal churn. The churns were left on a heavy wooden platform outside the barn where they would be collected each day by a lorry. The old lady gave me a cup of creamy milk from Bessie the cow, the fresh milk before it had gone through the cooler. Nothing I had drunk had ever tasted like that before. Rich and warm and perfectly happy in my mouth. I remembered that milk after I'd forgotten everything else. "There's more of them up the lane," said the old woman suddenly. "All sorts coming down with lights flashing and all. Such a palaver. You should get the boy into the kitchen. He's hungry and a cup of milk won't do a growing boy." The girl said, "Have you eaten?" "Just a piece of toast. It was burned." She said, "My name's Letty Hempstock. This is Hempstock Farm. Come on." She took me in through the front door and into their enormous kitchen, sat me down at a huge wooden table so stained and patterned that it looked as if faces were staring up at me from the old wood. "We have breakfast here early," she said. "Milking starts at first light, but there's porridge in the saucepan and jam to put in." She gave me a china bowl filled with warm porridge from the stovetop, with a lump of homemade blackberry jam, my favourite, in the middle of the porridge. Then she poured cream on it. I swished it around with my spoon before I ate it, swirling it into a purple mess, and was as happy as I have ever been about anything. It tasted perfect. A stocky woman came in. Her red-brown hair was streaked with grey and cut short. She had apple cheeks, a dark green skirt that went to her knees, and Wellington boots. She said, "This must be the boy from the top of the lane. Such a business going on with that car. There'll be 5 of them needing tea soon." Letty filled a huge copper kettle from the tap. She lit a gas hob with a match and put the kettle onto the flame. Then she took down 5 chipped mugs from a cupboard and hesitated, looking at the woman. The woman said, "You're right, 6. The doctor will be here too." Then the woman pursed her lips and made a noise. "They've missed the note," she said. "He wrote it so carefully too. Folded it and put it in his breast pocket, and they haven't looked there yet." "What does it say?" asked Letty. "Oh, read it yourself," said the woman. I thought she was Letty's mother. She seemed like she was somebody's mother. And then she said, "It says that he took all the money that his friends had given him to smuggle out of South Africa and bank for them in England, along with all the money he'd made over the years mining for opals. And he went to the casino in Brighton to gamble. But he only meant to gamble with his own money. And then he only meant to dip into the money his friends had given him until he'd made back the money he had lost. And then he didn't have anything," said the woman. "And all was dark." "That's not what he wrote, though," said Letty, squinting her eyes. "What he wrote was, 'To all my friends, I am so sorry it was not like I meant to, and hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive me, for I cannot forgive myself.'" "Same thing," said the old woman.